Digital 410 Media proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts, Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Dennis Blocker.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II-based podcast, and we are back for another episode. I think it's only fair to do some housekeeping here. If you're a member of Patreon, you already know because I put a little video up for you guys. But me, Jeff, and Dennis, we got together and we decided we're going to move to a 2-show-a-month schedule. One, just because we're all super wicked busy, but two, we've been doing this since almost, 2017 now? We have gone over in depth a lot of the stuff that we really know in depth, and so we want to bring you guys new content. But in order to bring you new content on new topics of World War II, we got to get caught up with that. And so by moving to a 2-episode-a-month schedule, it allows us more time to prep and bring you guys new content. With that being said, we're bringing you old content tonight because it's about Iwo Jima, but we'll get to that here shortly. First and foremost, before we go any further than that, you want to go ahead and get the drawing out of the way, Jeff?
I mean, or we just heighten the anticipation a little bit? Because, I mean, it's up to you. We do it now, we do it at the end. I mean, either way.
We can do it at the end of the episode. I printed up some names. They're in the old pot here.
Yeah.
So, you know what? Maybe to make people stick around, let's build the anticipation. Why don't you go over what the prize is going to be that we're going to give away later in the show?
Yeah, so one Patreon subscriber is going to, a lucky Patreon subscriber is going to be sent a few items that I didn't mind donating to the show based off of the content and the subject that we're going to be talking about in this particular episode about Iwo Jima. And I totally agree. We've talked about the subject before, but I did come prepared. I think I've got some stuff to talk about that we haven't gone over, so I'm excited about that. So one of the items,
not to cut you off, but we have Dennis's contribution. Last time we've done this, it was just me,
right.
You, and Henry. Time before that was just me and you. And so now we have Dennis' contribution and his ability to provide more context with the naval side.
Absolutely. So it's going to be a great show. One of the things that you're going to receive is I have it's laminated into a bookmark, and it is a genuine 3-cent stamp issued in 1945 that shows the Marines raising the flag on Mount Suribachi. It's essentially a stamp of the Joe Rosenthal photograph. It says here, the battle for the small volcanic island lasted 6 weeks. Capturing the island enabled the U.S. to build an air base within range of Japan. So I sent Don a real nice photograph of this. So it's, like I said, it's just kind of a small laminated bookmark, but it's a real stamp built into it. And
well, the nice thing about that bookmark and the size of it, it's going to prevent you from losing that stamp. So that bookmark makes it more trackable and easier to keep hold of.
You're absolutely right, because I have 2 other stamps, originals, they're just loose. It's just the stamp, so I got to be careful. You're right, you can misplace that real easy. And then since I've been given ash and sand from Iwo Jima from so many veterans for so many years now, I decided to give a little out, put a little bit in a little plastic container here. It's about the size of a challenge coin container. So I put some volcanic ash from Iwo Jima in there. I remember the first time I got Iwo Jima sand, I was about 13 or 14, and it was like my prized possession. So I'm really excited to share some of this with another lucky winner tonight.
That is really awesome too, because Japan has really tightened down on who they're letting go out there now. So it's a rare item. It's pretty awesome. Someone's going to get that. That's very, very cool.
That's a very good point, Dennis, because we didn't really think too much about that until the last time Jared was on. And he was saying, as these veterans pass away and as there's technically no reason for Japanese military to allow us to come back, they're going to start tightening it down and prevent us from coming back. And so maybe make those travel plans with your battlefield tour guides here sooner than later.
For sure.
So we decided, because of the time of year, when we don't have a guest scheduled, which we do coming up, and we'll talk about that later, but when we don't have a guest, we tend to kind of lean towards anniversary of, some key times in World War II, key events that were really crucial. And I think for any World War II buff, Iwo Jima does kind of hold a special place for us. Yes, it's a very popular battle. It's one of those, World War II now is almost a footnote in American history, unfortunately. But it seems like people are still familiar with the Rosenthal photograph. And it's kind of still has that enigma to it. It really captured the American public, even though the man who took it thought it really wasn't a great, photograph. But there was something so symbolic about it. And then, of course, as we know, as years have gone by, it's really become the symbol of not just victory, but just of the United States Marine Corps as a whole, right? I mean, if there's one image that captures the United States Marine, I think this is it. Of course, with the bronze statue and all the times that it's been recreated and used over the years. So Iwo has always been, especially for me, it's always been one of those battles that's really held interest for me, really held intrigue, and it's been fascinating to go beyond. Okay, so we know the flag was raised, and then you learn, oh, that was actually the second flag that was raised, right? Um, there's great movies about what happened there. And then if you go another step deeper, okay, wow, the battle actually lasted for 6 weeks. The battle goes into March. And then what I would like to reveal, maybe a little later in the show, is potentially something that most folks maybe have never heard of that has to do with post those 6 weeks after March of 1945 on Iwo Jima. And I'm not just talking about, those. The Japanese straggler, that comes out, years later. We've heard that story as well. So I found something that kind of fits in the timeline in between
Nice.
when the Marines were leaving the island and when that last Japanese defender surrendered. So it's in that time gap.
Real quick before we get into that, just because you brought up the Rosenthal photo, how lucky are we, especially nowadays with our lust for multimedia? How lucky who gets mentioned less, but hypothetically in modern days, his content gets seen more. Sergeant William Homer Bill Gnaust, the Marine combat photographer who was standing there who filmed. So not only do we have the flag raising photo, but we're lucky enough, and he caught it just in time. You missed like the first 2 seconds when they bring it off the ground, but if anytime you look at that video footage, luckily he was standing right next to Rosenthal, maybe a little bit to the left, and we were able not only to see that photo that we all love so much, but then to be able to see the actual video footage, and then the has since been colored video footage. And real quick, I got a video that's going to come out coinciding with this. I've mentioned it in the past, but I was rusty on the details. I've since gone over it. So we know Rosenthal shot the photo, right? Felix de Weldon saw the photo and within 24 hours started working on the project that became the 60-foot statue that we all have seen and love. Well, during that process, he built three 20-foot plaster statues. One of them went to the Marine Corps. One of them went somewhere else and was put outside and kind of melted away. And then one of them was stored away in dry storage. Well, in 1965, the Rosen brothers, the people who founded Cape Coral, reached out to de Weldon. He pulled that last surviving, well, technically only two survived. One of them's, with the Marine Corps. And then this last one, that last one was actually used to build our Iwo Jima statue here in Cape Coral. And I'm releasing a video on it. So if you're ever in Southwest Florida, Jeff drove by it when he was down here to film Walking Point. When you come over the bridge and you see that 20-foot Iwo Jima statue on the right, that is not a reproduction. That is not an homage. That is actually made from one of the three 20-foot molds that Felix de Weldon himself made as part of his process. Because obviously you're not going to go from a 1-foot statue to a 60-foot. You kind of got to figure out how you're going to expand it without losing features. And so our statue here in town is molded from one of those 20-foot statues that he made. So technically it's one of the originals. So,
Cool.
so that's very cool.
Yeah, that is super cool. So I mean, there you go. It's kind of it's everywhere. It's a symbol of something that's actually so much bigger than itself. And yeah, super excited that Dennis can talk about because it's always the Marines, right? The Marines, 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 Marine City, Iwo Jima. But Dennis knows more than anybody here. The Navy's contribution specifically 3 days prior to the landing, and being able to, what those LCI gunboats did, taking those hits, but setting up for success 3 days later to be able to track the muzzle flash from the hills of Suribachi so the artillery could lay a lot more accurate fire on D-Day. I think was just it's imperative to understand that. And then a little hint to what I'm going to talk about later. So Navy, of course, Coast Guard is involved at times with, especially with LCVPs and landing guys on the beach. The Marines take the island, but how many of you know how much the Army fought on Iwo Jima? Dennis is shaking his head, yes, because
Yeah.
this guy's a wizard, right? Like he knows Iwo. But I'm betting a lot of our listeners don't know this story, and I'm real excited to talk about it.
Awesome.
Absolutely, and we've brought this up before. Anything from the miniseries to the books to just the topic at large. When you think the Pacific or the Pacific Theater operations, you just assume the Navy and the Marine Corps. And yeah, the Army was there, to drop off some gear that we stole and all that fun stuff. So no, I too am very interested to hear about the Army's contribution to
Yeah, I'm
this
excited to
battle.
hear that. Yeah.
Carrying a firearm daily comes with serious responsibilities. Responsibilities your everyday counterparts may not have to consider. Knowing where you can and cannot legally bring your firearm is crucial. But sometimes, life takes you places where carrying isn't an option. That's where the Stopbox Pro portable gun safe comes in. Securely store your firearm in your vehicle while handling life's obligations. Safety, responsibility, and with peace of mind. Stopbox Pro. Protection when you need it. Security when you don't. For more information, visit stopboxusa.com/D410.
On February 3rd, 1945, General Kobayashi, the commander of Iwo Jima, wrote his family the last letter that he got out. He's writing to his wife. As I always say, there's a good chance that the enemy air raids will multiply in intensities to many times their present levels from spring onwards. So I think you should quickly go somewhere safe while you are still able to do so. It's unlikely you'll be killed by a bomb proper, but you must understand that there is a considerable danger of being killed by the fire caused by an incendiary. They have started dropping large numbers of incendiaries where I am, and fires occur although there's nothing to burn here. And of course, that portends what would be the great fires that would envelop. And Kobayashi saw that. He could see the writing on the wall. He knew he was going to die. He knew all of his men were going to die. He knew Iwo Jima was going to be made into an airfield, and he was warning his wife to get out.
This small island in the Pacific, only 8 square miles in size, became the setting for one of the bloodiest fights in the history of the United States Marine Corps. A fight that would test the limits of human endurance, courage, and sacrifice. Iwo Jima, a name that before 1945 meant little to the world, just a speck in the vast Pacific, roughly 5 miles long and 2.5 miles wide at the broadest point. But what made this island so crucial was its location, a strategic stepping stone between the United States-held Marianas and the Japanese mainland. Capturing it meant securing a foothold.
Iwo Jima's drama really started on the 16th of February, and it started with the minesweeping operations. It was a little hint of how tenacious the Japanese were going to be when one of the minesweepers gets hit, when they're just doing their regular boring sweeps off the shores of Iwo Jima, operations that they've done many times before at many other islands, Saipan, Guam, Tinian, other places, and there had been no problems. But suddenly at Iwo Jima, one of the minesweepers gets hit, and it's a little hint of what's about to happen. Meanwhile, 12 LCI gunboats from LCI Flotilla 3 are on their way. And I wrote something this morning that I would want to read to kind of start this off. Cooks and seamen aboard the darkened, bobbing gunboats had been up for hours, whipping up great batches of eggs. The glorious aroma of freshly baked bread and pies carried on invisible wings throughout the ships, bringing smiles to the faces of the fitfully sleeping sailors. The crew's frantic pace, combined with the massive amount of food prep, bespoke of great events on the horizon. The sailors could smell it before they could see it, the island, that is, and it was only days before that they'd come to know its real name. During rehearsals and briefings at Ulithi, they had only known it as Island X. The destination, now off to the northeast, still hours away, vented an oppressive aroma of rotten eggs that made its way through ventilation shafts and blacked out hatches. The disgusting and mysterious scent spoke volumes of the island that would soon test every fiber of their being. To the Japanese, it was known as Iwo Jima, Sulphur Island, and workmen on the island at that moment could little fathom the titanic forces then descending from all parts of the compass to their location. Of course, Japanese knew an invasion was coming, and they had been feverishly working in abysmal conditions to turn the island into a fortress. Their commander, who had traveled to America and actually had American friends, knew the way to hurt the Americans was not to meet them on the beach, as had been done so many other battles, but to let the U.S. get ashore, bunch up, and then blast them into oblivion. The idea was to make the Americans pay in blood for every square inch of the godforsaken island.
Iwo Jima was a fortress covered in unforgiving terrain. Its sands, made from thick volcanic ash, swallowed boots and made movements grueling and challenging. And looming above it all in the distance was the ominous peak of Mount Suribachi, 556 feet of hard rock, a natural stronghold at the island's southern tip.
For the gunboat sailors, their mission was one they had performed multiple times at places like Saipan, Guam, Tinian. The majority of the crews of the battle-hardened flat-bottomed ships were well tested, having seen combat as far back as the Aleutians and Kwajalein, Inuitak, Alingalapalap, Uterik, and dozens of other atolls in the Marshalls. So this flotilla, LCI Flotilla 3, was the most battle-hardened of the Navy. They were at this moment mere hours away from Iwo Jima. Their mission, to provide cover for the recon portion of the invasion 2 days off, 2 days before the Marines arrived on the 19th. The recon element, made up of UDT 12, 13, 14, and 15, over 100 frogmen, would swim in ice-cold water with only a thin layer of grease spread over their bodies. And then offshore, they'd drop into this frozen water, swim toward the beach. The gunboats lined up across from their assigned colored beaches, and in a matter of an hour would make naval history.
The Battle of Iwo Jima was unlike anything the United States military had encountered before. The Japanese knew they couldn't win a direct confrontation against the overwhelming might of the United States forces, so they prepared something else, a battle of attrition, a fight to the last man. Kobayashi transformed the island into a near impregnable labyrinth of defenses. Over 11 miles of tunnels snaked beneath the island, linking command posts, barracks, and supply caches. Pillboxes and hidden artillery bunkers were strategically placed, offering interlocking fields of fire. More than 1,500 reinforced fighting positions covered the landscape, allowing the Japanese defenders, estimated to be between 21,000 and 22,000 strong, to hold out against the inevitable onslaught.
That history started for most of the gunboats at about 10:50 on the morning of the 17th. As they cruised in towards their assigned beaches, a mission they had done many times before, they'd taken casualties, but it was only one gunboat hit here and an occasional one hit a couple weeks later. So they weren't unprepared mentally for what was about to happen. About 10:55, LCI 441 on the extreme right flank of Iwo Jima's beaches took the first hit, a massive hit, a mortar, right on the bow, causing explosion, throwing bodies across the deck. William Hildebrand of the LCI 449 was 500 yards to the port of the 441. He could see it. He just about yelled back, the 441 when they got hit. They got hit by a mortar on the ammunition locker on the 449. Now, see, the difference between what was happening to the gunboats on the right flank and the left flank was significant. On the left flank, the LCIs 473, 471, 474, 473, 471, 450, 438, they were all near off Mount Suribachi, and they were all taking artillery hits. Why is that important? Because artillery from that close and that trajectory was a straight shot. It was like a rifle shot, a big rifle. But what they did to the 473 was these gunners, someone had such an excellent shot from Suribachi that the artillery actually punched through the big 473 painted in bright white numbers on the side of the ship. Nice for zeroing in on. Punched right through that. And then the gunner followed it up. And it's even in the battle report from the 473. This excellent gunner followed that shot with one through the hole. And it went into the engines, knocking all the engines out and flooding the engine room with 8 feet of water. It just so happened the 473 was turning at that moment, and its momentum allowed it to coast further out from shore. And they noted they had about 40 large artillery splashes, 100 yards, that kept falling about 100 yards short. So they were just out of range, thankfully. But they were all hit. Every single one of them were hit. The relief vessels went in to help them. They were hit. The LCI sailors, though, on that flank, on the left flank, they were being hit by these artillery shells. And so it was kind of a blessing, because where was all the crew? They weren't down below. They were up top. So the shells that were hitting, they were hitting in the flanks and the sides of the ship and the hide of the ship. And they were blowing up in empty troop compartments. They were blowing up in empty galleys. They were blowing up, and of course, in the engine room, which was knocking out some of the propulsion. But there wasn't massive casualties on the LCIs on the left flank. On the right flank, it was a different story, because on there, the LCIs were being hit by mortars, and they were the large mortars, and they were floating in and landing among the crew. And that's why you would see the 449 would have 21 killed and 22 wounded out of the crew of 70. The 441 would have just as many casualties. The 438 would be significantly damaged and bloodied. And from the guys, the stories that were told, a lot of their ability to communicate with the help was wiped out as masts were blown off the ship, taking with them the signal flags, taking with them the radio antennas. Then they had signal lights, but those had all been smashed from explosions in the 449. And then just recently, yesterday, I was going through my garage looking for material about this, and I came across an interview I forgot I did about with the signalman from the USS Tennessee battleship that was covering them. George Panos was his name. He described how frustrated he was as a signalman, because that day the wind was low, and those flags that did have pennants, they just draped down and covering each other. It was an interesting little detail that I had no idea about. The flags, they couldn't even signal that they were injured or they needed assistance, because the flags were draped down. But the one thing about this was that UDT guys, their commander, Red Ball Hanlon, he said that what he heard that day on the radio aboard the Estes, the command ship, what he heard that day should go down in naval history, along with, this was his quote, not mine, with "damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead," or "I have not yet begun to fight." He heard radio traffic from the LCIs that day, and what he heard said it moved him to tears, and it made him say that he wished it would go into naval history. And what it was is it was a radio message that came from the LCI 469. And the radio message was, "Fires under control, request permission to return to the line." It wasn't fires extinguished. It wasn't repairs all conducted, ready to go back in. It was fires under control, request permission to get to the line. And that kind of dedication really spoke of the leadership of LCI Flotilla 3 under Commander Mad Mike Melanophy and his men under him. They had a mission: protect the frogmen. They only lost one in the water that day. Over 100 frogmen in the water, they lost one. On my grandpa's ship, they lost UDT 14's commander, executive officer, Lieutenant Byron Yarbrough, but he was aboard the ship there. So what were the benefits of it? You would think all this death, all this loss, 54 guys died total, over 200 were wounded in action, and from all the different gunboats combined, a group of about 700 men. What was the benefit of it? The benefit of it was that aboard all these destroyers, the Lutz, the Hall, the Twigs, the Black, Aboard the battleships, the Nevada, the Texas, the Tennessee, were little beady-eyed sailors who all had, with their binoculars and their long glasses, were watching. And everywhere they would see a door open and an artillery piece come out, they would jot it down. They would see a flash, and they would see a puff, and they would jot it down. And this information was quickly relayed and jotted down in charts all over the bay that day. And Admiral Grosskopf, breaking orders, took the Nevada in point blank range, which is something, man, if I had a time capsule and I could go back in time. Took that point blank range, and an eyewitness actually reported seeing artillery pieces tumbling down Mount Suribachi that day. Pieces of gunners that were so accurate they could punch a hole in the side of a ship and follow it up with another artillery shell through the same hole. Artillery pieces that now, because of the sacrifice made by the LCI sailors, were not available to the Japanese on the invasion day 2 days later. All of that. And then on the 19th, when the Marines came, they had no idea that as they were coasting into the beach, how much had already been done. How that as they cruised in towards and lumbered along those LVTs, as they lumbered along towards Iwo, they were crossing over the bodies of 54 sailors who had been buried at sea, and all that loss and all that sacrifice just to try to give them a chance at success.
But before American boots would ever touch the sands of Iwo Jima, the island was pounded by a relentless air and naval bombardment. The U.S. launched 74 pre-landing bombing missions, sending in waves of B-24s and B-29 bombers from the Marianas. At first, the raids were relatively small, 12 to 24 aircraft per mission. But as the invasion date neared, the strikes intensified. By the final days, up to 100 bombers would rain fire and destruction down on the island in a single mission. And then the Navy took its turn. From February 16th to February 19th, the United States fleet opened fire. Battleships, cruisers, and destroyers unleashed everything they had, pounding the island in an attempt to weaken its defenses. But Kobayashi's strategy had been masterful. His men remained concealed deep in their bunkers, waiting for the inevitable landing invasion. More than 450 landing craft carried the men of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions, nearly 70,000 Marines, toward the shores of Iwo Jima. Supporting them, the U.S. Navy provided nearly 40,000 personnel for amphibious and bombardment operations, while the Army Air Forces controlled the sky. The ramps dropped, the world turned to hell. The smell of diesel, salt, and something else, something burnt, clung in the air. My boots sank into the black volcanic sand as I leapt off the Higgins boat. My rifle clutched, hands shaking, hearts pounding. The plan was to rush forward, push inland, secure the beachhead. But nothing went to plan. The sand was deep, sucking at our feet, slowing us down, making us perfect targets. The moment we hit the beach, the Japanese let loose. Machine guns cracked from hidden bunkers, and the mortars came screaming in. Men were dropping left and right, so never even made it off the boats. I dove forward, hugging the earth, feeling the grit against my teeth. I could hear the screams, the shouts of "Corpsmen," but I couldn't look back. Somehow, we crawled forward inch by inch, through the blood and fire. The bodies of our own laid scattered on the surf, the waves washing over them, as if trying to pull them back home. But there was no going back. The island had to be taken, no matter the cost. I don't know how long we were pinned down before we moved. Minutes, hours. Time didn't exist, just survival. My rifle felt like part of my body, my fingers locked around it, and all I could do was keep pushing forward, through the smoke, through the sands, through the worst of it, because that's what Marines do. The Marine divisions and their objectives, just to lay out the outline of this. The 4th Marine Division was on the right flank, the southeast beaches. Their landing beaches were beaches Yellow 1 and Yellow 2. Their objectives were to secure the eastern side of the island and advance towards the heavily fortified airfield number 1. Some of the challenges they faced were fierce resistance from Japanese pillboxes, bunkers, hidden machine gun nests. We had the 5th Marine Division. They were on the left flank, southwest beaches of Mount Suribachi. Landing beaches were Green 1 and Green 2. Their objective was essentially to capture the volcanic Mount Suribachi and cut off the southern portion of the island. Their challenges were the Japanese defenders used vast networks of tunnels and caves, forcing the Marines into brutal close quarter combat. The 28th Marines, part of the 5th Division, raised the famous flag on Mount Suribachi on February 23rd. Then you had the 3rd Marine Division. Landing beaches were Blue 1 and Blue 2. Initially, they were held in reserve. Objectives: once committed, they were tasked with pushing north and taking airfield number 2 and advancing towards the heavily fortified Japanese stronghold in the north. Challenges: faced intense resistance at places like Hill 362, otherwise known as the Meat Grinder, and the final Japanese defensive line at Kyoto Point. As the Marines stormed the beaches, they expected a brutal resistance, the kind they had previously experienced during the island hopping campaign of the Pacific. But surprisingly, the beaches were eerily quiet. Unbeknownst to them, they were stepping into a trap. Kobayashi had ordered his forces to hold fire until the beaches were packed with American troops and equipment. And when they finally opened up, all hell broke loose.
Can't imagine trying to run through that.
That
I
sand?
can't imagine trying to, at least in some battles in Europe, you get to run from street corner to street corner, or hide behind a hedge, or hide behind some tree, or run from some shattered building to another. Or if you're in Bastogne, you can dig a hole, and hopefully, if it's not too cold, and the hole you're digging isn't going to immediately start collapsing in on you because of the the way that the substance that you're digging in is so fine. It just immediately starts to fill in, and then you've got the hell of the vents, the heat vents coming up, which turned out to be a mixed blessing and a curse, right? Because it was so cold, that the heat kind of helped him at night. But it's just, looking at it, I of course had never seen combat. Jeff has. He can speak to this more educatedly than any of us can, but I can definitely empathize. And just I can't imagine not being able to run very fast because of the ground is just, it's like you're sandbags on your feet and you're trying to run, and there's no cover. That kind of courage.
And to that point, as you're saying that, the closest thing that I could even think of that are most of our audience who've never experienced combat, it's almost like that dream. You ever had that dream where like you get in a fight and no matter how hard you swing, you can't make contact with the person you're fighting? That almost had to be like they're trying to run to find safety and their feet just aren't moving no matter how hard they try. And this kind of goes back to downside of what the technology was at the time, because reading up on this today, we all know, for example, when the Rangers landed at Pointe du Hoc, they knew the elevation and they had trained with the ladder systems and the grappling hook rope ladders and all these different ways. Well, when our intelligence was kind of laying out the landings at Iwo Jima, the photographs, because of the quality of the photograph back in the day, they had no idea of the 15-foot sandy embankments that they're going to have to climb. They just thought it was a gentle roll. They thought we're going to land them on the beach, be a little sandy, but they can make their way up. They had no idea of the 15-foot tall sandy berms. That's why we didn't come equipped with any sort of ladder systems or planking systems, any way to get up over a 15-foot sandy berm. That's why our guys were stuck sinking into it, because we had no idea that they were there prior to the landing waves, because they just didn't show up on the black and white, high altitude photographs. The machine guns, mortars, and artillery erupted from hidden positions, cutting through the Marines. The volcanic sands offered no cover. The American forces were pinned down, struggling to advance against the determined enemy that refused to surrender. This was the beginning of one of the bloodiest battles in World War II, a battle that would last 5 weeks, a battle that would test the courage, endurance, and sacrifice of every man.
Jeff, didn't they show up with jeeps on some of the Higgins boats? They just immediately just were inert.
Yeah. Just this conversation, it reminds me of a conversation I had with old Fred Harvey, a dear friend that I really miss.
Mm.
And for Fred, Iwo was the fourth island campaign that he participated in, and he lasted 9 days before it took several Japanese grenades to evacuate him off the island. But he said every fly boy that dropped a bomb on Iwo Jima needs to get a medal. He said because those bombs may not have done a lot of damage, to the emplacements. He said, but instantaneously they could dig a foxhole
Oh,
for
wow.
all of us that hit the beach. And, you know, we don't think about that. We really don't. Every one of those holes that you see in the actual footage or in pictures, that's courtesy of the 7th Air Force B-24s that have been hitting it for almost 7 months.
Wow.
And you bring up another good point too, Don, about photo reconnaissance. You know, the battle started unfolding as early as July of 44, you know, when the 7th started going in. And Kobayashi, that shows up in some of his letters home as early as July of 1944, the air raids started happening. And that's when they really kind of got the idea that, okay, Iwo is a target. The civilian population had to start being either conscripted for labor or, of course, sent back to the mainland. Those that you could get to be sent back. Um, but at that time, the Japanese had to consider too that only 150 or so miles away to the north lied Chichijima, which had a navigable harbor, had runways. So it's interesting to think Iwo had no harbor. And Kobayashi it didn't take much Japanese intelligence to figure out exactly where the Marines were going to land because it was the only place that they could land. Um, by the end of July, the Japanese defenders in the air were completely knocked out. I think there was initially about 80 aircraft that they had at their disposal for combat air patrols, and within 3 or 4 air raids from the Hellcats, they were almost completely annihilated. Down to I think the last five. It was a handful of, there's a couple zeros and then a couple Judies, I think, and then they were taken out on the runway by B-24s bombing. So once that air cover was completely annihilated, we kind of had our way from a photo reconnaissance standpoint. And yeah, you're right. I don't. The photos were crystal clear, taken at low altitude. I mean, it was like the best conditions you could think of for intelligence purposes. But yeah, that the quality or maybe the lack thereof of that volcanic ash, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you see the wreckage on the beach, and it's not just because of accurate gunfire from the Japanese. Of course, give the gunners credit up in Suribachi, but they just couldn't go anywhere. Yeah, I mean, like Don said, these quarter tons roll off LCVPs, or ducks are coming in, or you know, trying to put tanks ashore, and they just simply sunk. And yeah, I look. Yeah, I get combat's combat and all, but no, I don't have any idea what that would be like either. You know, for guys who have done a tactical living history event, you've got this gear on, and if you're not accustomed to just running in general,
Mm-hmm.
it's a clumsy ordeal. And that just had to have been compounded by the quality, like I said, of just that soft mush. I loved the line, and both of you probably will remember. I love the line from um, Sands of Iwo Jima, where, and I can't think of the character's name, but he was a farmer from Tennessee, and he gets pinged, and he's laying there on Iwo Jima, and he's looking at the soil. He said, "This must be the poorest soil." He said, "God must have taken everything that was left over when he made the earth and put it here, you know, getting shot for this."
Yep.
You know, as a farm boy from Tennessee, like it's just junk. Um, but I want to throw this at you guys, um, because right around the same time that the air raids started happening in July of 44, something came across FDR's desk, and he did not give approval for this. This was denied. But it brings out, I think, an interesting conversation. Did you know that there was initially a plan to have Navy gunners gas Iwo Jima?
Jeez.
Now, the gunners were not going to be told that that's what was happening. They were going to put high explosive shells mixed in. So the shells that were gas would either look like a dud or they would hit and it was extra smoke. They wouldn't realize it, right? It's like the one guy in the firing squad with a blank, you know, round. Um, so interesting to think about it. And FDR, obviously, FDR denies this mission, um, and I think he probably, maybe, I'd like to think, maybe he had the forethought to, um, what would that have looked like post-war, right? We gas the island, we let it naturally detox, we send Marines ashore, and we basically capture dead, dying, incapacitated Japanese garrison. Now, granted, probably still the ones that were dug in that wouldn't be as affected. Still going to be a fight. But to just completely launch a bunch of gas shells over 10 square mile island and then to come away victorious from that, there would have been some heads rolling, I think, post-war.
Oh, and it
Uh,
would have been at the top of every conversation because that would have been the only time during the entire war that we deployed gas on any battlefield, especially that
right.
magnitude. So yeah, that would have been a huge topic of conversation, and
Absolutely.
But it
it
also is
probably
like
would have shined us in a little bit of a different light amongst our allies throughout the world.
it's like if the one target you could possibly justify using it on,
Mm-hmm.
Iwo Jima would be a good target to use. There's no civilian population; it's only military. Um, but I think that's an excellent point, Jeff. And I think it really speaks to how terrible World War One was. That the guys that were there, they remembered the gas, and they were just too horrified to even use it, even think about it. I mean, they thought about it, but you know what I mean. I feel like it was just like they didn't want to go there.
Yeah, no, and I think it also builds upon the conversation of dropping the bombs in August. That sort of thing was always
Wow.
kind of a absolute last resort. And, by the time we hit Iwo Jima, FDR he's only got about 2 months left. I mean, his clock is ticking, right, before he passes away. So I think too, as that battle is raging on, taking much longer than they probably, not probably, than they initially thought, a lot longer.
10 days.
Right.
The original battle plan called for 10 days. We're to be done with this island.
And the third division was probably never even supposed to land,
No,
right?
they
They
were
were
in
they were held
reserves.
in reserve. So when you see them getting committed, when you see Kuribayashi's tactics really taking hold here and making them fight, when they started understanding the honeycombed caves and tunnel systems and underground hospitals and the way that they were just existing without being touched, doesn't matter how many B-24s you send overhead. It makes me wonder, like, did somebody go, "Told you, Mr. President. Should have freaking gassed that place." Like I wonder how much that even came up. It's the things that make you go, hmm. Um, so I just, like I said, I kind of wanted to throw that out at you guys, and I just think it's worth
Yeah,
mentioning
for
when we
sure.
talk about the entire drama that did unfold there.
Now, because we've done so many episodes on the Marine Corps', you know, contribution to this, and Jeff mentioned earlier we're going to get into the Army aspect. Before we get there, another group that often gets left out, the Seabees. So, how did the Seabees help? Well, let's go back to this 15-foot black sand dunes, which, by the way, it occurred to me, a reason we didn't know is it's black sand, right? If it was brown sand and we're taking these surveillance photos, you could see the shadow line, right? You could see the sun hit and see the shadow line. You could do the math. This is all black, so it just looks flat in these photographs. So, how did we get off the beaches? During the initial landing on February 19th, 1945, the volcanic sands of Iwo Jima created a massive obstacle for the Marines. Unlike the firm beaches that allowed for quick movement, the black sands made it nearly impossible for the troops to move quickly under heavy fire. Marines found themselves bogged down, unable to advance as Japanese defenders rained down machine gun fire, mortar fire, and artillery. This is where the United States Seabees Construction Battalion played a critical role in helping the Marines move inland. How the Seabees used their tractors to help save Marine lives. They had armored bulldozers and LVTs, landing vehicle tracked for cover. The Seabees brought in armored bulldozers and amphibious tractors to act as mobile shields, pushing forward under the fire to help create paths for the Marines. These vehicles provided cover for wounded men and officers during their advance, clearing the beachhead. The deep volcanic ash trapped vehicles, supplies, and men, making it almost impossible to establish a proper beachhead. The Seabees use bulldozers to clean pathways, help get supplies and reinforcements off the landing crafts and into the fight, pulling stuck vehicles and equipment free. Many tanks, jeeps, and artillery pieces got stuck in the soft sand. The Seabees used their tractors and bulldozers to pull them free so they could be used to support the Marines in advancing into the island. And more importantly, building makeshift roads under fire. The Seabees started construction of temporary roads using steel mattings and crushed rocks to allow vehicles and troops to move more effectively towards airfield number 1 and beyond. Because as we've discussed, when it comes to World War I, II, and modern day war, the frontline infantry is one thing, but they're nothing without logistics. They're nothing without ammo, food, medical supply, gear. And so to be in that sort of environment and not have some sort of path of transportation and logistics to get gear, supplies up to the front line quickly, and just importantly, to get the wounded back to the ships, to get them to naval vessels and naval hospitals quickly, is literally life-saving and is a lifeline. And so the Seabees were there. They got the job done under heavy fire. Because oftentimes we think Seabees, they come in after the Army and Marine Corps clear the area, and they might get pinged at by some snipers and this while they're doing. No, these guys were there in the thick of it, doing their part to help get the men off the beaches and get the gear into the fight.
Absolutely. And it's funny because doing that program in Fredericksburg for so many years, it wasn't until Fred Harvey and I had these conversations. He harped on it. You better mention the Seabees. He said, you better talk about the Seabees and what they did. And that's when I really started truly understanding, this is an important part, kind of the unsung heroes in a lot of ways. But man, logistics is everything. It doesn't matter. The best guys on the beach, the best weapon systems. But man, the amount of PSP that those guys unfolded out there, and just golly, the logistics of bringing all that stuff ashore and building ways to, because you can only advance as far as your supplies can get, right? So it's impressive what the Marines are doing, the flame tanks and these guys with their M1 Garands, and Woody Williams is out there going nuts with a flamethrower. But if you cannot supply these guys, the front line stops and it becomes a detriment.
And based on technology, everything was so damn heavy. Just look at the mortar that Eugene Sledge and his guys used. The base plate alone, just the plate, 50 pounds. The mortar tube itself, that's another 50 pounds. And then the shells. And so that one piece of weaponry, over 150 pounds in that deep sand. And we were talking, you hear from the European theater and from the Marine Corps as well, but they often say part of the reason why artillery and mortar strike is so devastating mentally and morally is because it's the one thing you feel you can't fight back against, right? You just got to lay there and take it. Well, imagine driving a bulldozer. This ain't a movie. You're not driving around, driving the steering wheel with one hand with an M1 carbine in the other one and popping shots. No, you're sitting there taking it. You got a little bit of protection from your heavy equipment, but you're not firing back. You're not quote unquote fighting back. You're literally you're grading a road, clearing paths while someone's shooting at you, and you're not fighting back. Your version of the fight is getting that road built. You want to talk about nerves of steel. It's just to be out. That's just like almost, corpsmen have to do the same thing too, right? They're out there in the battlefield. Some of them had sidearms, but for all intents and purposes, they had no way to fight back. But yeah, the Seabees are just, and you want to talk about a target on your head, at least a corpsman hypothetically wasn't supposed to be shot at, even though they were. But you see a group of guys in heavy equipment coming up your way, you're going to put everything you possibly can on them to stop them from moving and stop them from clearing out paths.
Man, the guts. The guts. Intestinal fortitude. Where does that come from? It's gracious. You got to know you're dead.
Yeah.
Right. You have to have had already made that decision beforehand. You can't do that thinking you're going to make it. Like that's incredible. I don't know if you fellas have ever, I know Jeff has, but I've only had maybe 2 or 3 situations in my life so far where I had to decide that I was dead and just go ahead and perform. But yeah, it's not a good feeling. But what's really weird is that once you make that decision, you get oddly calm, which is really bizarre. And then you're really able to function. Of course, we always talk about that moment in Band of Brothers when Lieutenant Spears is talking to, you know, Blythe down there. It's true. It's true. So I just wish they had a better Seabees movie, so that to really pay homage and respect to what those guys did, because, I know John Wayne saved the day, but it's like they did so much more.
A 42-year-old buck sergeant with a rifle.
Shortly after he saved the day on the longest day, first he went and saved Europe, and then he brought his M1. The only guy in all of Europe, according to that movie, with an M1 Garand. Everybody else fought with Thompsons. He was the only guy in the entire continent with an M1, but he had to use it as a crutch. He brought his crutch down to the Pacific and said, okay, we did it over there. We can do it here. Get out of my way. We're getting it done, boys. Rambo's grandfather.
Right. I think it's important to point out here, there's no way to improve upon this statement with everything we're talking. When Admiral Nimitz said that at Iwo Jima, uncommon valor was a common virtue. I mean, those words are pristine.
Mm-hmm.
Pristine. Okay, so this article is about 5 years old. Cavemen, marking the 75th anniversary of the 147th Infantry on Iwo Jima. By all popular storylines, the Battle of Iwo Jima is one of the greatest and most iconic battles in U.S. Marine Corps history. From the iconic photos of Marines landing on its volcanic ash beaches on February 19, 1945, to the raising of the American flag atop Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima's popular legend is that it was an all-Marine show. For the soldiers of the Ohio National Guard's 147th Infantry Regiment, who fought on the island from March to September 1945, nothing could be further from the truth. The Cincinnati and Southwest Ohio-based regiment entered active service in October of 1940 as an element of the 37th Division. Shortly after departing for the Pacific Theater in 1942, the regiment was relieved from the Buckeye Division and remained a separate regimental combat team for the duration of the war, serving in the composite Army Marine Division. When the 2,952 men of the regiment landed on Iwo Jima on March 21, 1945, the sounds of battle still filled the air. The ships transporting the troops and equipment ashore made quick runs to the beach to avoid enemy observation and fire. 5 days later, the Marines declared themselves victors and departed the island, leaving the mop-up operations to the 147th. U.S. Marine Corps General Harry Schmidt, the 5th Marine Corps commander, estimated that only 100 to 300 Japanese remained on the island, wrote James J. Ahern, a platoon leader in Company F, 147th Infantry. His estimate was greatly optimistic. Thousands of Japanese had turned the 8 square miles of island into a series of complex underground defenses that consisted of 13 miles of sophisticated caves connected by tunnels. The enemy lived underground by day and moved about at night, securing supplies and attacking American forces. In the early morning of darkness on March 26th, as if to mock departing Marines, 200 to 300 Japanese attacked the bivouac area of a unit set to depart the island that day. The Marines' 5th Pioneer Battalion, with the help of the Company A 147th Infantry, which brought along a flamethrower tank, helped blunt the attack. Our company formed teams equipped with guts, flashlights, and pistols, wrote Company B veteran James McGuire. Our cave cleaners called themselves cavemen. The extensive nature of the caves made elimination of the enemy extremely difficult. The 147th developed various techniques to clear the caves and maintained a rapid tempo which sought to prevent individuals and small groups of Japanese troops from banding together. The extensive nature of the caves made elimination of the enemy extremely difficult. The 147th developed various techniques to clear the caves and maintained a rapid tempo which sought to prevent individuals and small groups of Japanese troops from banding together and carrying out large-scale attacks. Removal attempts varied from the use of small arms and hand grenades to smoke and flamethrowers. Nisei interpreters and Japanese prisoners of war were also utilized to try and convince the enemy to surrender. Many of the Japs were talked into surrendering, others, deeply fanatic, holed up until ferreted out and killed, added McGuire. I threw in a white phosphorus grenade and the Jap threw it back, Ahern wrote. I was slightly burned by the exploding grenade. I tossed in a fragmentation grenade and the Jap threw it back. When it exploded, a fragment grazed my wrist. This got my dander up. I cleared the cave with a flamethrower. The cave closing techniques developed by the 147th Infantry led to the killing or capture of 2,469 enemy soldiers and continued until the end of June 1945. Daytime or nighttime, combat action on Iwo Jima was always exciting. The risks were there. Some days were more adventurous than others, added Ahern. The regiment departed Iwo Jima on September 8, 1945, and moved to the island of Okinawa for similar duties. After 2 months of occupation there, the 147th Infantry returned to the U.S. and was inactivated on Christmas Day, 1945, at Vancouver Barracks, Washington. In a commendation letter from Lieutenant General Robert C. Richardson, the commanding general of the U.S. Army Forces, Pacific Ocean area, the regiment's contribution was summed up well with this. The members of the 147th Infantry Regiment, whose mission was the destruction of the Japanese forces remaining on Iwo Jima after organized resistance had ended, displayed consistent courage and combat ingenuity in dealing with an enemy determined upon a course of fanatical resistance. Despite conditions of terrain and emplacement favorable to the Japanese, morale remained at a high level and few casualties were sustained. The military proficiency and devotion to duty constantly manifested by the regiment were in great measure responsible for the final security of a vital advance base. And that was in a commendation letter from Lieutenant General Robert C. Richardson, the commanding general of the U.S. Forces Pacific Ocean area. The regiment's contribution was summed up well.
Wow.
I have been studying World War II for a long time, guys. That's a mere footnote in the history of the Battle of Iwo Jima.
Yeah.
I remember hearing a story about a P-51 fighter pilot, I believe, who lost his life while sleeping when a Japanese snuck into a tent full of our airmen with one of the fighter groups that were stationed on Iwo Jima, of course, well after this is supposed to be considered secure. We know now that the island was never 100% secure before the war ended in September of 45, right? It was never fully secure. And a lot of that had to do with the terrain, the caves. So I just I just found that really, really interesting that there's always a little bit more to the story, right? Now the rest of the story,
Yeah, for
right?
sure. Paul Harvey.
As Paul Harvey would say.
Yeah.
And it's important to know. Obviously, you know, and you guys know me. I'm always looking for ways to highlight the Army in the Pacific. We don't need to highlight them in the European theater, of course, but the more people that I've met and guys like Fred Harvey, for example, right? I mean, the guy was in the 5th Mardiv. He watched the flag go up. He knew the boys from the 28th. He knew Lieutenant Colonel Chandler Johnson. I mean, those were friends of his. For him to point out the Seabees, remember the Seabees, right? So I think it's interesting, and I hope our listeners got something out of tonight's episode because, again, like Don said, we've talked about Iwo Jima before with several guests, but I think we all have some books that we probably would like to recommend to our listeners, and I hope they took something away that it's always more than what it seems. Every story we talk about, there's always a little more to dig out and learn.
But I know that you've inspired me to look on eBay and see if I can find you know how the U.S. Army did their official history of World War II. I'd like to see if they covered that in depth. So I'm gonna look. I'm gonna look and see. Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm also curious what kind of combat experience they had beforehand. You know, were they a green unit going in there, or were they?
Mm-mm.
Do you know?
No, I mean, apparently, like I said, when they were still attached to the 37th, I'm not sure if they saw action, but I think they were part of the unit that took over for the Marines as far back as Guadalcanal. Maybe not the exact same troopers that hit on Iwo Jima, but probably some of the same cadre. So yeah, you bring up a good point. How battle tested were these guys after they went from the 37th to become the 147th? So that's a great point. Absolutely.
And it
Yeah,
piques
can
my
you
interest
imagine?
as well because you said it's the Ohio National Guard out of the Cincinnati area. That's my hometown. I mean, I was born across
Oh,
the
wow.
river from Cincinnati. When I talk about my grandfather enlisting and going down to Richwood for that's listed on his enlistment papers. That's 25 minutes from Cincinnati. I mean, that is our area. Jeff threw out a quote earlier, and I want to, before we get to the next topic, I want to throw another quote out there from Lieutenant General Howland Mad Smith. If I knew the name of the man on the extreme right of the front line, I would have recommended him for a Medal of Honor even before we left the ships. But Iwo Jima was not just another battle. It was a turning point, a place where heroes were made, where legends were born, and where thousands gave their last measure of devotion. It was a battle that proved, beyond any doubt, that victory in the Pacific would come at a devastating cost. This was Iwo Jima. Before we get into what you're reading, I think it's only the right thing to do, or must be brought up. The reason I'm wearing this shirt tonight, and we were talking before the show, the reason Jeff is part of this podcast is because of a production of a movie called Walking Point. And the lead character was not the human. The lead character was the dog Duke. Jeff, I think it's only fair or only appropriate for you to notify the audience, if you will.
Yeah, well, for those of you who don't follow Walking Point or Canine Duke on social media, but you're familiar with Walking Point, the movie. Yeah, we lost Duke today. He had been suffering for some time, and I only know what Ed has told me, which is his handler and fellow lawman from Menlo Park, California. And Ed's become a really just such a close friend um, since production, and we've always stayed in touch. And I feel for him. A lot of people don't get to, and Dennis excluded here, but a lot of people don't get to share a working relationship with their dog, right? It's their comfort. It's something they come home to. But Duke and Ed have been a team for years. Duke has been a drug dog at Menlo Park. If you go on his Instagram and you see the amount of drugs and money and illegal weapons that he has confiscated and what he has been a part of, um, Duke was not just one heck of a dog. He was one heck of a police officer. And that team of Ed and Duke is really, truly an inspiration, I think, for all law enforcement agencies in a place that's pretty tough to be a lawman today, in California. Uh, so yeah, obviously we feel for Ed and the entire Menlo Park Police Department because of Duke's contributions. And unfortunately, like I told Don earlier, Duke now joins all of the dogs that we used in the production of Walking Point, as they are now all gone to the other side. And I think it's a reminder of, the why it's so important to keep our greatest generation alive, because Duke, and because of Duke, I learned so much about what dogs did in World War II. And obviously, Dennis can speak to a lot about what dogs have done in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is not a one-off thing by any means. Dogs have been a big part of the American military for 80 plus years. So Duke has been a reminder of that, and I just, if I could tell anybody who knew Duke, or got to pet him or got to have him stand up on your knee, he's got to be one of the most well documented dogs that I'll probably ever know. And like I posted earlier, he's probably the coolest, hardest working four-legged co-star I'll ever know. He really truly was the star of the film and was the backbone of why we made that film, and the inspiration that RJ had to write the script, write the book, and shuck out a lot of money to make sure that thing happened. So unfortunately, yeah, today we lost Duke at the age of 9, and again, he's never forgotten, and we'll just continue to honor the legacy of not only Duke but all the dogs that served in the Dogs for Defense programs in World War II and in law enforcement today.
And the audience probably don't realize this because Duke was a dog of so few words when it came to microphones. He's just kind of microphone shy. He's actually appeared on this podcast twice. Obviously, the first time was when we did the rap party with the Walking Point crew. He was in the room. He didn't have much to say, but he was there. And then on the follow-up episode, probably a year later, RJ and Chelsea and Ed and Duke were in Orlando, Florida at the AKC dog show. The Florida Doberman group brought them in, and RJ called me up, said, hey, we got this booth down here at the convention center. We're, trying to promote our books and our movies. Can you come down here with any of your artifacts and decorate our booth? And so I brought down my mannequin with all my Marine Corps gear and my tins and my cot, and I set up the background, and we set up the podcast studio, and we did a podcast. I think we're probably one of the only World War II based podcasts to do a episode from a AKC dog show. So we got that in our midst. But yeah, I sat there with them for 8 hours, and seeing Duke in that environment, right? Because you're talking about him being a working dog for the police, working dog for the movie set. In 2020, he appeared on A&E's reality show, America's Top Dog. He was on that as well. And to go from that to see him kind of lounging and then obviously following commands. And as Jeff said, I saw it in firsthand. People would come into the booth, sit down, and either Ed would sit down next to him, then Duke would jump up in his lap and pose and do these posing shots. And that kind of, poor Duke, God love him. Duke at this point had been so programmed for photo ops because of him appearing in schools, appearing in movies, Instagram, that when he was on Top Dog and running the obstacle course, there's this part where Ed had to lift him up. But Duke's like, oh, photo shoot time. So he put his hands up on Ed's back and pose. And this is a timed event. And so he was just so used to when Ed got in certain positions, okay, it's time for me to perform and do my photo shoot. So sometimes if you watch that episode, Ed's trying to get him to do certain movements, but he's confused. I'm thinking, well, there's cameras here, there's lights here, there's an audience. It's time to pose. And so instead
Hollywood.
of him, so he would get in that pose motion, but I would see it. And then during the day when things would slow down a little bit because dog shows were going on, and then in between, people would meander around and come see us in the booths. And so during his downtimes, when everybody's watching the show, Ed would take Duke out into the little concrete thoroughfare and do his walking routine where he would walk and Duke would kind of maneuver in between his legs, and he would stop and kind of stand guard, and then he would turn around and do the whole thing. And it was just, he was such a well-behaved dog. He was so smart and just charismatic. And so, Duke, you will be missed. And as we cannot, if it wasn't for that movie, if it wasn't for the fact that I followed the Marine Corps Museum in Texas Instagram page and saw them post a picture, hey, this is a production we're doing, and reaching out. You want to talk about kismet, right? Meant to be. Imagine this, Dennis. I don't think you ever heard the story. How I found out about Walking Point is I saw the Instagram post that the museum shot about them shooting this film about the dogs. And so I reached out to RJ's production company, and I said, hey, my name's Don Abernathy. I host a World War II podcast. I saw the photos. I'd be interested to have you guys on to promote your project. And we went back and forth. Like, where are you located? Oh, I'm located in Florida. Well, hey, by the way, we're shooting the final few scenes in Florida on this old coconut plantation. Would you be interested to come out to the house where we're staying at to record? I'm like, sure. Where are you guys shooting this at? And they said, are you familiar with Pine Island, Matlacha? I said, yeah, Matlacha is exactly 5.5 minutes from my dad's house. So not only were they coming to Florida, they were shooting in my backyard. And so awesome. It went from me coming down and shooting their wrap-up party to, well, you're here in town, feel free to come out to the set. So I was out on set that entire day. I actually helped Jeff get some of the uniform stuff on the actors and all that, and had a great time. But yeah, if it wasn't for that movie, Jeff wouldn't be sitting here, and then by proxy, you wouldn't be sitting here because I wouldn't know you. So that movie is the reason the two of you are part of this podcast.
That's cool.
And so it's crazy how much we kind of owe to RJ Nevins, that production company and their social media manager over at the U.S. Marine Corps Museum in Texas, because if they wouldn't have posted that picture, I would have never seen it, and I would have never known who to reach out to. So it all just kind of fell in line to get us all, the three of us, here where we are today.
That's
And you know how I knew I was gonna like Don? Because that's the first time I met him, right? We're in that coconut palm tree grove. Dude wears P-42 frog skin USMC trousers on set.
With my boondockers, because
Like this guy.
you
And
never
you knew
know
how
when
to
they
put
need an
leggings
extra.
on.
And I have my full uniform in the truck. I'm like, hey, if they need somebody to walk through the back of a frame,
excellent.
I I brought everything but my blanks. I had my M1 with me. I had a full uniform, helmet. I shaved, had my pack. I'm like, if they need anybody just fill in a frame in the background, I'm good to go. Because you never
That was
know.
awesome.
Well, I wish I would have bought my damn blanks though, because at that point in the production, the only firing going on was with the Arasakas. And so Jeff brought Arasakas down and had some blanks. I brought my M1, but I didn't bring any blanks. And so after production, you got a bunch of cats from California with really strict gun laws. Hey, we like to shoot these. And so they're shooting the Arasaka. I had an M1. I could have drove the 20 minutes home and got some blanks, but I wish I would have had some blanks so the crew could have had some fun shooting that rifle as well. But yeah, we had a good time. It was a
Yeah.
great time on set. I got a bunch of behind the scene photos that I want to share at some point. But yeah, so Duke,
I
you
didn't
will.
get to. You mind if I chime in about Duke?
Oh, please go ahead.
I didn't, of course, know Duke, but I think I can with my, writing about war dogs, Iraq and Afghanistan. I think I can speak to what Duke embodied in that movie. He embodied a battle buddy who was always down. He was always down to do whatever you wanted to do, 24/7. Never grumbled, never complained. He's always going to go. He's going to go with you. Love unconditionally. Always be by your side. Do everything within his power to protect you. And the only way he's not going to be there is if he's dead. Because even as dogs in Afghanistan, even if they were wounded, the one dog that was on that Navy SEAL mission, his front leg got blown off. He ran back to his guys with his own leg in his mouth. Ran back to the team with his own leg in his mouth. He's like, I'm here. And they're just like, oh my gosh, this guy. But, that kind of commitment, that especially that breed, the Doberman Pinscher and the Belgian Malinois nowadays, which we use, the German Shepherds always, of course. But it's just that commitment, that just always vigilant, always by your side, no matter what you're going through. He's not going to complain. He's not going to bellyache. He's not going to complain about the food or the lack of food. He's not going to complain that it's too cold or he needs another pair of another uniform, or he's not going to complain about the mud. He's just gonna soldier on, and it's freaking. I just love him so much. I don't know how we got lucky enough to have dogs, but it's a very unique relationship there.
One more behind the scene thing, and I'm sure Jeff remembers this. Duke was a stuntman. Duke had jobs to do. And in one of the scenes, Duke had to jump from off frame and attack the Japanese soldier. And so the original idea is we're going to set up a folding table off scene, put Duke on the table. Ed's going to give us commands. He's going to run and jump on the actor playing the Japanese soldier. And we tried this 4 or 5, 6 times, and the table was just too slippery. It just didn't work. So at a certain point, Ed moved the table, grabbed Duke, and said, "Ready, aim, action!" And just kind of did a potato sack shuffle, and it worked out perfect. He landed on the soldier, did the attack, and it was just so funny to see him try to jump out that. Come here, 1, 2.
Movie magic.
And that's how
I
it's
get that
done.
question. I get that question more than I think anything else, and I just fielded it. The episode should be dropping shortly from World War II Above and Below. That was one thing that Mitch asked me. He's like, "All right," he said, "it looks super real. I've watched this movie 100 times. Is that actually him and the actor in the same frame? Like, how did y'all do it?" Yeah, we literally just threw him on
He just lobbed him like a sack of potatoes. Like, here we go.
there. Yeah.
Oh, it was so
Good
funny.
times. Good times.
It was so funny. Just because best laid plans go until they don't work, and then you just got to think on your feet.
Yeah.
That's
Man,
what
you
do.
know, Don, you may not realize this, but so on this past Saturday, a couple days ago. My daughter turned 6.
Mm-hmm.
She was a month old on the
Mm-hmm.
set of Walking
I
Point.
remember.
The Walking Point baby.
And you know what? My first time I met Jeff's kid, right? They rented this beautiful Airbnb on Matlacha, and there's a parking lot, and then there's some canals and some boat docks. It's pretty much on the water. And I never met Jeff's son. He was so young at this point. He walks in with caught another one, Dad. He walked in with probably a 3 pound bass. Apparently, he just been down there bass fishing the whole time. He's like, movie schmovie. I got me some Fort Myers bass to catch. And apparently, it's like the 5th one he caught that day. He just walked in with the bass, like, hey, got another one.
That's awesome.
Yeah, good times.
This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Fume. Fume cartridges are crafted from medical grade polyester designed for use with essential oils. Fume, a non vape, non nicotine, non tobacco device, works by replacing the hand to mouth fixation, calming nervous tension through fidgeting, and distracts you from the bad habits with delicious flavors. Psychologists have shown stopping a bad habit cold turkey is very hard for your brain. The Fume handheld device has a built-in fidget, also has a weight similar to most vape pens. If you're interested in replacing old bad habits with new good habits, head on over to tryfume.com/D410M and get yourself a free pack of toppers with your purchase. The toppers is a perfect new accessory designed with your comfort in mind. Slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. So replace those old habits with a new habit, a good habit. Simply go to tryfume.com/D410M. That's tryfume.com/D410M. So, fellas, we'll start with Dennis. Hey, Dennis, what you reading?
Well, for this subject, I recommend you probably have to get, I don't know if it's available on Amazon, but it's by Lieutenant John Keith Wells, U.S. Marine Corps. It's called Give Me 50 Marines Not Afraid to Die. And it's his memoir of his time as a lieutenant on Iwo Jima. I highly recommend that. And from the Japanese perspective, I do recommend who both Jeff and I actually discussed tonight or brought up the letters of General Kobayashi. I do recommend that you also read So Sad to Fall in Battle, and the based on General Kobayashi's letters from Iwo Jima. As anyone knows who loves World War II history, and especially, I remember hearing one of the guys was asked, I think it might have been at the event we were at, Jeff, where we met Dale Dye and all that, the Marine that was there, Graves. Was that the gentleman that was there?
Yeah, Don Graves.
I think I heard somebody ask him what was his favorite Iwo Jima movie, and he said Letters from Iwo Jima. I'm pretty sure I heard that. And I know that I do hear that from a lot of people, and it's how I feel about it. But if you feel that way, then you're definitely going to want to read So Sad to Fall in Battle.
To answer your question, Dennis, yes, Give Me 50 Marines Who Are Not Afraid to Die is available on Amazon. Looks like the published date was February 1st, 1995. So right around the time of the anniversary. I will say this is a paperback, and based on the price, I want to say this thing is a rare book. So
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if somebody goes on Amazon and buys the only copy. But yeah, they do have.
Yeah, try eBay. Recommend you try eBay as well.
They have a few. They have a few of them on there, but yeah, that's a hard book price on a paperback book. So it's got 5-star ratings out of 13. It's 4.8 out of 13 ratings. So huge. Looks like this is a damn good book.
Anytime you can get a firsthand account from a corporal, a PFC, a lieutenant, I mean, that's the good stuff. My dad, he came over to my new house here and he sat down in my office, and we were looking at how I've got everything decorated here, and he's looking at all the shelves upon shelves of books, and he said, "What are your 2 favorite books in this whole collection of books?" And I said, "That's very easy. They're the only," and it gives me goosebumps to even think about. I says they're the only 2 books that have their own pedestal. They're actually on pedestals. One is With the Old Breed by Eugene Sledge, and the other is Company Commander, and from the European Theater, by
McDonald.
Charles McDonald. Yeah, that's right, McDonald. Those are my 2 favorite books, and that's right. It's that small action, that small unit,
I've never mentioned it on the show just because no reason to, but because you brought up the fact that you have this book. What were the two books again you said you have on a pedestal?
Yeah, they have pedestals. The rest are all filed like you see on bookshelves, side
So
to
I
side.
have
But I
I,
have two that are on. They have a pedestal. One is Company Commander's right over there, and Eugene Sledge's book with the old breed is over there.
so in front of me where I'm staring now below the TV, I have my bookshelf packed full of books. But then over here, and you guys have seen photos of this cabinet, I have a curio cabinet with my authentic artifacts. There's a lot of reproduction stuff, and here's some real stuff, but like my rare, kind of important, don't want anything to happen, don't want people, touching too much. I have in this curio cabinet, and I had to move my copy of With the Old Breed in there. And the reason I did that, I didn't do it right away, but after Henry and I formed a friendship and a relationship, I asked him. I said, "Hey, can you have your mom autograph my book?" And I sent it to him, and he sent it back, and I put it on my bookshelf. And then I don't know, maybe 6 months after his passing, he told me, your book is the last one she ever signed.
Oh, wow.
And so that's going off and never to be read again, and it's in my
Yeah, for
cabinet. And
sure.
so I'm going to buy another copy for reading, because the fact that she wrote the manuscript for that book, and then
Yeah,
that's the last book she ever autographed. That's that's
that's
definitely an
pretty cool.
adult. That's not getting read in the bathroom again for sure. So
Yeah,
gonna have to get a new copy. Jeff, what
yeah.
you reading?
Yeah, I've got a few recommendations too, and I just want to point out though, this is what makes Dennis Blocker so freaking cool. Because if
It's a
somebody came
long
into my
list. I don't know.
office,
We're pretty long into the show, so you're gonna have to pick a few things. It's a long
I,
list.
I know, I know, there's a lot to choose from. But if somebody told me, if I was Dennis and somebody asked me, what are your two favorite books in here? I'd be like,
The
the
two I
ones I
wrote.
wrote.
That's what I
The
thought
ones
too.
that I
That
wrote.
just goes to show who's the narcissist on the show. Me and Jeff, because I'm thinking clearly the ones you wrote, right? Didn't even mention them.
They could be terrible books, but if I wrote them, those are the ones that I would say.
Yeah, I have them sitting prominently in the back of my screen, so you saw them during every episode. Like the people who show up on like the news channels do, right? Here comes Steve talking about the election party post picnic with the pork chops, and he has his books and it's all. Yep. Yeah, I was waiting for him to say the same thing too. Well, my favorite two books are on pedestals. They're mine. There's
That's
Clear
what
and the Bonsai Cliffs.
one of the things that makes Dennis Blocker so freaking cool. All right, so what I'm reading now, and I highly recommend. I'm rereading it. It's just called Ewo by Richard Wheeler. I
Yeah.
know. Yep, everybody's nodding. That's kind of a
Sorry.
common
So
one.
good.
Lions of Iwo Jima. Lions of Iwo Jima is a really good perspective. It really surrounds the 28th Regimental Combat Team and what they did. It's more around the flag raising, I think, the opening scenes of the battle, maybe say the opening stanza, and that's by Fred Haynes. He's a retired Major General, the Marine Corps. He was there,
I don't think I
right?
have
So
that one, Jeff.
this one, it's one of my favorites. You're not gonna get the 25,000 foot view of the battle. This is gonna be more gritty. You're gonna smell Suribachi in this book. I'll say
Mm.
that. So, The Lions of Iwo Jima by Major General Fred Haynes. Um, I would also recommend Richard Newcomb's Iwo Jima, the dramatic account of the epic battle that turned the tide of World War II. This is a really good, easy read. 300-page paperback. Just a good overview. If you've never read a book about Iwo Jima, I would maybe start here with Richard Newcomb's book. He's a pretty celebrated author. He's the author of Abandoned Ship. You guys may be familiar with that one.
Oh yeah.
Um, I truly believe, and we know now from Rosenthal's picture, right? A picture's worth 1,000 words. That picture was 1/700th of a second, that exposure. So I got to go with Eric Hamill's Iwo Jima as well. And if you're not familiar with an Eric Hamill book, um, you need to be because they're outstanding, very high quality photos. This is a book you leave on your coffee table as kind of a conversation piece. There's a lot of good reading in here, but the pictures are second to none. And it's funny this. So I had several World War II Iwo Jima veterans sign this book, right? Of course, Fred Harvey and Don Graves, Even Medal of Honor recipient Woody Williams signed this book. And this is the only picture that I did have in this book of Don Graves on the beach. During the war, he was not identified as that being him. Didn't happen until after the war. So if you're a reenactor, if you really want to see the uniforms, things like that, some of the equipment, lots of great pictures of the tanks, the Higgins boats. There's some LCI gunboat pictures in here at the beginning. Really, really all-encompassing photographic history of Iwo Jima would be my recommendation. And lastly, I'm a
Real
little
quick, real
surprised.
quick,
Don,
just real quick, because you
yeah,
guys going over these books, I'm realizing how few actual Iwo Jima books that I have. All three of those books are available on Amazon. So if you guys are looking for the that I believe the full title, you said Eric,
sure.
Eric Hamill.
Eric Hamill.
Yeah.
The full title, if you guys are Google searching, is Iwo Jima: Portraits of Battle, the United States Marine at War with the Pacific. And then the other book is also Jeff mentioned is available on Amazon, both hardback and softback. The Lines of Iwo Jima, the story of the combat team 28, and the bloodiest battle in Marine Corps history. And then the one that Dennis mentioned prior to. So all three of those are available on Amazon. They probably won't be after this podcast comes out. So if you
Well,
listen to this,
I
get
just
to it
ordered the
quick.
Lions of Iwo Jima right now.
Hey, we got to throw Dan King a bone here. We got to throw Dan King a bone. A tune called Iwo Jima.
Yeah,
I'm kind of surprised Dennis didn't mention that, but yeah, we've got to throw that one in there. If you haven't read Chuck Tatum's Red Blood, Black Sand, do it. I mean, there's so many. I have a separate shelf just for my Ewo books, but those were just a handful. I think that you really, if you've never read anything on Ewo, those, what did we mention? Maybe a total of 10. That's a great start to understand this battle.
absolutely.
And this battle, despite the geographical size of the island, is so big. There's so much involved that you probably need those 10 books to get a good full grasp on the logistics involved in this.
I messaged Dan King while we were talking about 40 minutes ago because he just popped in my head and I was like, oh man. So I messaged him. I was like, hey, can we send you a link and cop in real quick? He was like, thank you so much for thinking of me. I won't be able to, but next time for sure. So we'll get him.
You guys got anything else you want to cover before we wrap it up?
Oh, it was great. Good time.
Let's talk about our next guest real quick
Sure.
and
Coming up
maybe do a
on.
giveaway.
See, that's why you're in charge. That's why I do things at the top of the show because I got short-term memory. Once we get into the depths of the context of our show, all the rest of it goes out the window. So, so yeah, let's do the giveaway now, and then we will promote the show coming up in another week or so. So we got the names and the old helmet. By the way, if you're an M1 helmet aficionado, this is a fixed bail helmet. The other bails broke off. I did get an extra bail to have welded on there. So we're going to pick a name here. Getting old's horrible. Donna Eckhoff. Donna Eckhoff is our winner.
All right.
Nice.
Yeah, I recognize that name. Very cool.
Yes, sir. So congratulations. Jeff will be reaching out to you. You're on Patreon too. If not, I'll reach out on Jeff's behalf to give his address. You get your address to him because obviously he's in possession of these items. It would make no sense for him to send them to me and then me to send them to you. So Jeff will send them to you directly. Congratulations so much. And next week's episode, we have a fantastic author coming in with a great book. Speaking of context of World War II that not everybody reads up on, the aspect of segregation in the military. It's not something we all dip our toes into a lot. And so this book is based in that. And so, Jeff, I'll let you start that off.
Well, I haven't finished the book yet, but I'm a good ways in, Don. I think you're a little further than me, but yeah, just to introduce very quickly, Dr. Roger Newman is an incredible author, and he's authored several medical books. Essentially, this guy's a leading OBGYN. Been voted by his peers as a top doctor in the U.S. for 30 consecutive years. I mean, this is incredible. It's almost like, wow, how does this fit in with World War II? And we know he's so proud of this latest project called Boys, and it's about two boys that grow up in the South. One, of course, is a white boy, the son of a dairy farmer and preacher, and a black boy whose family is brutally murdered by the KKK, seeks refuge on this dairy farm. And these two boys, Alex and Pete, become friends from an early age, all the way through, and have these visions of grandeur of staying connected as they join the army in 1942, a much segregated army, more than they had initially planned. And then we see their stories unfold throughout the Second World War as they get involved in 1944. So really excited just to hear from Dr. Newman the inspiration for this book, because I don't think it's a coincidence
No.
that Pete and Alex, the name of the two boys, are the same names as Roger Newman's father and Roger Newman's father's best friend. So I'm really interested, but you're right. It's definitely a topic I think most shy away from, but it is an important and integral part of our history, especially from a military standpoint. In World War II, it's not just the Tuskegee Airmen, the Montford Point Marines. There's more to that story. So interested to hear more from him about it.
And we'll get into definitely more details next week, but learning things that learning things we didn't formally know about. And it's kind of a connecting through point tonight. Jeff was talking about the Army that participated on Iwo Jima being a National Guard group. The division they sign up with after they graduate high school, because they're trying to get away from their primitive Baptist father, which, by the way, I learned a lot about primitive Baptists. I didn't even know that was a thing. So you learn a lot about a lot in here. But yeah, they go off and join the National Guard, which is segregated. The concept that during the Germans' attempt of subterfuge and tomfoolery and sabotage, we all knew that, the Germans were reported of stealing American uniforms and dressing up as MPs and spreading misinformation. But what I didn't know until reading this book is one of the ways we tried to combat that was to take black drivers from the Red Eye Express, or the truck route and the motor pool, and turn them into MPs. Because to have white Germans dressed in MPs who can speak English is one thing, but to find a black German to do the same thing, no. So they were kind of help try to build security in the idea by having the black MPs out there that at least we know they're not Germans. And so you kind of learn a nice aspect of history about that as well, and everything that goes along with the trappings of the trials and tribulations of being a black soldier at that time and in that army. And like that character says, the motor pool ain't the greatest place in the world, but it beats cooking food all day. And
Yeah.
and they learned the reasons behind doing what you're asked to do and keeping your mouth shut, which actually tended to make them into better soldiers, because with all the trappings that come along with that environment, to be able to follow orders without question or verbally, snapping back and just getting the job done, just to be left alone. I mean, that's like job number one, ain't it? Just do what you're told and get it done, regardless of who you're with. Well, so, the ability to follow directions to the T and get things done makes for a good soldier. So yeah, it's a very, very good book. There are some hard topics on there, and there is some details. The story that they told about the French girl who was attacked by the Germans and the mutilation that happened to her body. It's pretty gory, detailed stuff, but it goes to help paint a picture. Because after all, I think we can all agree one of the most important things about writing about World War II is not to romanticize it, right? You don't want to paint this pretty picture to make it something it's not for the sake of pushing your project. Now, there are some very gruesome details in this book, and no no descriptive language was pulled to prevent from offending anyone's delicate sensibilities. But to that point, it makes it an even more intriguing read. The stuff that you don't want to read, you still can't put down. So it's a very good book. So we're looking forward to having Mr. Roger Newman on the next episode. So please join us. For myself, Jeff Copsetta, Dennis Blocker, Duke, you're in our thoughts and prayers, and Ed and your family too. We'll see you all next week.
This has been a Digital 410 production.